Deep in the heart of a forgotten jungle lies a secret whispered only in ancient legends, a place untouched by time, where shadows guard a sorrowful truth, and a prince lives trapped in a form not his own. They say a wicked curse transformed him, a prince once beloved by his people, now hidden away in the wilderness, a curse destined to break only if a brave heart can face the unknown. But legends are not just stories. Sometimes they wait for the right person to bring them to life. The girl adjusts the straps of her backpack and takes a deep breath as she steps off the edge of the familiar path and into the jungle. The air is humid, filled with the scent of earth and leaves. With every step, the canopy above grows denser, filtering sunlight into dappled patterns on the forest floor. Birds call out, their cries echoing through the towering trees. But there's an undercurrent of silence, a stillness that feels both calming and eerie. Pausing to pull out the ancient map, she examines the faded ink, her fingers tracing the winding lines. "This must be the river," she murmurs, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. She glances around, searching for landmarks. The faint sound of water rushing over rocks catches her attention, and she smiles. "I'm on the right track." Hours pass as she navigates through the thick vegetation, using the map and her instincts. She carefully steps over gnarled roots and pushes aside hanging vines, her curiosity driving her forward. Suddenly, a distant roar pierces the quiet. She freezes, her heart pounding. It wasn't the sound of any animal she had heard before. Deeper, more resonant, and strangely sorrowful. Her eyes widen as she whispers, the roar that echoes in the silence. Gripping the straps of her backpack tighter, she quickens her pace, following the sound. The jungle seems to shift around her, as though guiding her closer to its heart. After climbing over a ridge, she finds herself standing before a massive stone archway covered in moss and vines. Intricate carvings line the stone, depictions of animals, people, and a majestic figure wearing a crown. She steps closer, brushing her fingers over the carvings, marveling at their detail. "This must be part of the kingdom," she says softly, her voice filled with awe. As she moves through the archway, she senses she's no longer alone. A flicker of movement catches her eye, and she turns sharply. Between the trees, a pair of golden eyes watches her, unblinking. She steps back, her breath caught in her throat. The massive silhouette of a gorilla emerges from the shadows, its presence both commanding and calm. The girl's fear mingles with fascination as she whispers, "You're real." The gorilla tilts its head, studying her just as she studies him. In its gaze, she doesn't see hostility, only curiosity and a quiet sadness. The girl takes a cautious step forward, her gaze locked with the gorilla's. Its golden eyes seem to search her soul, as though weighing her intentions. She raises her hands slowly, palms up, in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to hurt you," she says softly, her voice trembling but steady. The gorilla doesn't move, its massive frame still as a statue. Then, with a low rumble, it turns and begins to walk away, its footsteps heavy yet deliberate. The girl hesitates for a moment before following, her curiosity overpowering her fear. The path is winding, flanked by ancient trees and overgrown ruins. The gorilla moves with purpose, leading her to a clearing where a massive stone tablet stands, weathered by time. Carvings cover its surface, depicting the tale of a prince who defied a sorcerer's demands and paid a terrible price. The girl's eyes widen as she reads the symbols, piecing together the story. You were the prince," she murmurs, looking up at the gorilla. The gorilla lets out a low, mournful sound, confirming her suspicion. He points to a section of the tablet where a crystal flower is etched, its petals glowing faintly even in the carving. The girl steps closer, tracing the image with her finger. "This is what can break the curse, isn't it?" she asks, glancing back at him. The gorilla nods slowly. Determined, the girl takes out the map again, studying it carefully. The markings seem to align with the symbols on the tablet, pointing to a location deep within the jungle. We'll find it, she says with a resolute nod. Together. Their journey begins in earnest, with the girl and the gorilla navigating the dense jungle side by side. They encounter challenges almost immediately: a collapsed bridge over a rushing river, a maze of thorny vines, and strange, glowing creatures that watch them from the shadows. At one point, the girl finds herself trapped in a pit of shifting sand. She cries out in panic as the ground pulls her down, but the gorilla leaps into action, grabbing a sturdy vine and tossing one end to her. With his immense strength, he pulls her to safety, the two collapsing on the ground, breathless. "Thanks," she gasps, looking up at him with gratitude. The gorilla rumbles softly in response, his gaze filled with concern. As they continue their journey, a bond begins to form between them. The girl talks to him, sharing her thoughts and stories, while the gorilla listens silently, his presence a comforting constant. Despite the challenges, she feels a strange sense of safety by his side. Finally, they reach the edge of an ancient temple, its towering spires hidden beneath layers of vines and moss. The girl gazes at it in awe, her heart pounding with anticipation. "This is it," she whispers. The gorilla steps forward, his expression solemn as they prepare to face whatever trials await inside. The girl and the gorilla step cautiously into the temple, their footsteps echoing in the vast, shadowy chamber. Shafts of light stream through cracks in the ceiling, illuminating intricate carvings along the walls. Each depicts scenes of bravery and sacrifice, as though foretelling the trials they are about to face. In the center of the room stands a pedestal, atop which rests a glowing crystal flower, its light casting shifting colors across the stone. The girl's breath catches as she takes a step toward it, but a sudden rumble shakes the ground, stopping her in her tracks. From the shadows, a massive creature emerges, a guardian, its body a blend of stone and living vines. Its glowing eyes lock onto the pair, and it lets out a deafening roar that reverberates through the chamber. The girl instinctively reaches for the gorilla, who steps protectively in front of her, his own deep growl rumbling in response. The guardian lunges, its heavy limbs crashing down where they stood a moment before. The girl scrambles to her feet, her mind racing. "We can't fight it! There has to be another way!" she shouts, dodging another attack. The gorilla nods toward the carvings on the walls, motioning for her to look. She runs her fingers over the images, trying to decipher their meaning. "It's a test," she realizes, her voice trembling. "It's not about defeating it. We have to prove ourselves worthy." She turns to the guardian, her hands raised in surrender. "We're here to help," she says, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. The guardian pauses, its glowing eyes narrowing as it studies her. But before it can react, the chamber begins to tremble again. The pedestal holding the crystal flower starts to sink into the floor. "It's disappearing," she cries, glancing at the gorilla. Without hesitation, the gorilla leaps toward the pedestal, grabbing the flower just as it vanishes below the surface. The guardian lets out an ear-splitting roar, lunging at the gorilla as he lands. The girl throws herself between them, her arms outstretched. "No, stop!" she yells, her voice echoing in the chamber. The guardian freezes, its massive frame looming over her. For a moment, everything is silent. Then the guardian steps back, lowering its head as though in acknowledgement. The crystal flower in the gorilla's hand begins to glow brighter, its light filling the room and driving away the shadows. The girl turns to the gorilla, her eyes shining with relief. "We did it," she says softly, her voice filled with awe. The gorilla looks at her, holding the flower gently as if it's the most fragile thing in the world. But the room begins to shake again, this time more violently. "The temple's collapsing!" she shouts, grabbing his arm. Together they sprint toward the exit, the walls crumbling around them. They burst out into the open jungle just as the temple caves in behind them, a cloud of dust rising into the air. The girl collapses onto the ground, gasping for breath. She looks at the gorilla, who holds up the crystal flower, its glow undiminished despite the chaos. "It's time," she says, her voice quiet but resolute. The gorilla looks at her, his golden eyes filled with gratitude and something deeper, hope. The girl holds the glowing crystal flower in her hands, its light soft and warm now, as though it's alive. She looks up at the gorilla, whose gaze is fixed on the flower. There's a mix of hope and fear in his eyes, a silent question of what comes next. "This is it," she says softly, stepping closer to him. "We can finally break the curse." The gorilla kneels before her, bowing his head as though surrendering himself to whatever fate awaits. She takes a deep breath, steadying her trembling hands. "Here goes," she whispers, holding the flower above his head. The light intensifies, spreading outward in shimmering waves that illuminate the jungle around them. The gorilla's form begins to glow, the light wrapping around him like a cocoon. For a moment, the world seems to hold its breath. Then, the light fades, revealing a man where the gorilla once stood. He rises slowly, his features noble and kind, his golden eyes now human but still carrying the same warmth. The girl stares in awe, her breath caught in her throat. You're free," she says, a smile breaking across her face. The prince looks at her, his voice soft but filled with gratitude. "Because of you. You broke the curse when no one else could." The moment is interrupted by the distant call of birds and the soft rustling of leaves. The jungle, once ominous and shadowed, now feels alive and welcoming, as if it too has been transformed. The prince turns to her, his expression both grateful and conflicted. "You've given me my life back. I owe you more than I can ever repay." He hesitates, as though searching for the right words. "Will you stay and help me rebuild my kingdom?" The girl looks at him, the weight of the decision clear on her face. She glances at the jungle around her, then down at the map in her hands, the map that led her to this incredible adventure. Finally, she smiles. "I think my journey isn't over yet," she says, "but I'll never forget this place. Or you." The prince nods, understanding in his eyes. He steps forward and places a small pendant in her hand, shaped like the crystal flower. "This will always remind you of the jungle," he says, his voice steady. "And of the friend you found here." The girl nods, her heart full as she turns to leave. As she walks away, she pauses, looking back one last time. The prince stands among the trees, the sunlight filtering through the leaves and casting a golden glow over him. She smiles, waving before disappearing into the jungle. The camera lingers on the prince, who watches her go, a faint smile on his lips as the jungle seems to come alive around him. The screen fades to black, and the sound of the jungle fills the silence. The faint echo of a roar, this time not of sorrow, but of hope, can be heard as the credits begin to roll.